Welcome to MycoWorks Talks. I'm your host, Xavier Gallego, VP of Brand and Marketing, and I'm delighted to take you with me on our journey to grow the future of materials. Thank you for tuning in.
Today, we're starting a new segment where our host, Chevy Gallego, sits down with MycoWorks CEO Matt Scullin to discuss the materials industry and the vision for MycoWorks. In today's episode, we'll tackle a few questions, including why mycelium? Why is the materials industry begging for innovation and change? And what are some of the challenges of scaling up our technology? These are just a few of the many questions we tackle in this informative episode. So let's get started.
Hi, Matt. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you for being here. I know that you've been traveling a lot. You are in between here, California and Paris. We saw each other at Vidar, like in South Carolina, Union. I mean, what a trip, right? Like, what is it for you to be in these three different locations, visit the plant that we're constructing? How do you feel?
Well, it's exhilarating. I'm a little tired, but it's very exciting. And Vidar is just amazing. It's incredible to see such a large project come together and to be standing in that racking system. It's going to have 50,000 trays in it. Super inspiring.
Yeah, the
really
scale
cool.
is huge. And we will talk about Vidar another time, but I just wanted to, ask you how you feel because I bet there is a lot of emotions going on through your body and most of us because we were there. And it's bananas. It's pretty crazy.
It is totally bananas.
It's beautiful to witness. So you know how we do the podcast and these talks. We're trying to be more conversational. And the first question that I ask is always, when was the first time that you heard the word mycelium? Because, when you heard that word, it has something in the sound of it that makes it remember. But with you, we already talked about it in the first episode of this podcast. And I think it's moment to ask you a more like complicated question, something that I wonder, and I think that some folks wonder as well here at the company and hopefully outside, is why mycelium?
Yeah, why mycelium? So first of all, and to give some context to all of this, materials are a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. And this is an industry, the materials industry, that badly needs to transform based on changing values, resource constraints, the need for sustainability, all that, but also grow given the need to fuel all of this growth in consumer products. All of those need materials. And this growth rate is gonna continue. So mycelium, I think to contextualize why mycelium is, it's what do we need for the future? What are we going to make materials out of going forward? And that's where mycelium can play a very special role.
It does make sense, yeah. But why not plants or fibers of other fruits or, I don't know, like all these alternatives? And tell me more because I want to know.
Yeah, so what we do at MycoWorks is that we grow a proprietary form of mycelium that we call Fine Mycelium. And we grow this Fine Mycelium as thin sheets that we then harvest and use as a product called Reishi that's super leather-like, but even better. And to a newcomer to this space, if you're just learning about it, mycelium is basically the roots of mushrooms. And not all mycelium is created equal, which is why it's such an interesting material. The mycelium that grows in the forest is very different from the mycelium that we grow at MycoWorks, which is also very different from the mycelium that our friends at Ecovative grow or our friends at Mogu. And so mycelium is not one thing. It's actually a class of materials. And what makes different mycelia unique is the combination of its constituents, so what the mycelium is made from, and also its structure, how the cells of the mycelium branch and mix and entangle, which is all a result of how it's processed. So, this, by the way, is like the definition of material science. As you know, I'm a material scientist,
yes, you
by
are.
training and in my heart. And this triangular relationship between ingredients and microstructure and processing, that's what material science is that interplay between those three things. And when we can use biology to affect all three, which is what MycoWorks is doing, rather than just using biology for ingredients, just using bio ingredients, which is what everyone else is doing. That's how MycoWorks is truly unlocking biomaterials and is going to push this field forward. So you can use mycelium as an ingredient, which, again, is what other companies do to make, quote unquote, mushroom leather, meaning they chop it up and embed it in a plastic. But you really lose the amazing properties of mycelium when you do that. And of course, you're no longer actually making a tunable biomaterial when you do that, or a biomaterial at all. What makes mycelium so cool is that by changing the processing conditions in which the mycelium is made, we can engineer its cellular structure and even the chemistry of the mycelium to yield materials that have subtly or even vastly different properties. So for instance, really simple example of how we do that is how we can grow mycelium that has a more rarefied microstructure, so the cells are further apart from each other if you look at it under a microscope, and it's a bit thinner, but it really feels and behaves like a lambskin, or a thicker mycelium, a denser mycelium as well, with more intertwined cells, and that's more like a calf skin. And then, of course, as our founder, Phil Ross, demonstrated, going back 20 years, we can grow a range of other materials like foams and bricks and all these other cool things you've seen folks making with mycelium lately.
And that we are doing sometimes too. Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for the masterclass, by the way. Why is it so malleable? Mycelium can be all these things. Like it feels like almost like a super material that we never explored before. So why?
Yeah. Mycelium is super sensitive to its environment. It's so sensitive even that we still have only just scratched the surface in understanding exactly what influences its growth. There's some literature on the basics of mycelium and mushroom growth, of course, such as its general sensitivity to carbon dioxide concentration in the air above it. But we've also observed at MycoWorks very fascinating processing effects from things like pressure, inverting the mycelium as it grows, exposing it to various oxygen conditions at different points in its growth, and many other things. So, the really crazy thing about what we're doing is that there's no first principles understanding of how to grow mycelium. You can't open up a textbook and find a passage on, this is how you get the right softness in mycelium. We're writing that, right? And nobody in history has ever thought about this problem before. Think of a material like iron, wrought iron, or steel. 3,000 years ago, humans figured out how to craft iron ore into iron metals and steels just through craft, right? Trial and error, sensing it out. And today, I can pull up a material science book and simply look up a chart of temperature, carbon concentration, cooling rate, and figure out how to make the steel.
The science is being made.
The science is there, right? And the learning curve is a lot faster today. Even though we're equivalent to where steel was 3,000 years ago, the learning curve with mycelium is a lot faster today because we have modern tools, of course. But this just goes to illustrate the opportunity that we have with biomaterials right now. And with mycelium in particular, because there aren't many organisms that have this sort of tunability with respect to their processing conditions. And, because mycelium is so sensitive, we can impart these different properties on it and get favorable mechanical properties. And so it's truly a unique and amazing organism, and it's an amazing and unique platform with which to make different types of materials.
It blows my mind, to be honest. Like I compare it to the universe, right? Like the little that we know, the more that we're learning, the speed that we're learning. I remember talking in various episodes about how little we know and how much we've done with the little that we know. But the thing that you remind me, a conversation that we had maybe a couple of years ago here right next to the office at Paradise Cafe. And I asked you, what do you regret? Because we were talking about your studies in Berkeley. And you told me, I wish I had taken more biology classes. Why biology?
I think it's because it's still the great unknown. And we are hearing a lot more about biology. And we all just got a crash course in one aspect of biology through the pandemic. And we're hearing a lot more about CRISPR and gene editing and all that. But these are very new tools. brand new tools. So that to me is exciting, is that when new tools are invented, and I think at MycoWorks, we're inventing a new tool with this platform that we have to grow mycelium. And the tool, right, selling the pickaxe to the miners, that's the good business to be in. That's the exciting part. And I think, generally speaking, that's where we're at with biology, is that we now have new tools. And it's this combination of science and creativity that's going to take us into our next phase of being humans and using biology the way that we already use physics and chemistry.
I think I have to go back to school because I'm I study art, so I better go and study a little bit of biology. I'm learning a lot working at MycoWorks, to be honest, and if you are curious, it's a good place to be. I remember at the beginning where we were talking about terms of colonization and organisms and the different types of cordyceps and things like that. Like now we talk about, I can watch The Last of Us and I know what they're talking about. So that's, it's crazy how much you can learn if you actually listen.
I love that episode, by the way.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate you. So I want to go back because I love the analogy about the steel and how it became, like it started from craft, right? There's a beauty in terms of the craft, like how you learn or how you achieve certain sense of, maybe you unlock innovation through the way you feel or the way you work with the material. But that's kind of like in a nutshell, like one people, one off. And I imagine like back in the day, one thing was like one person trying to work with iron, but scale was another issue. I mean, the next frontier for us, I guess, since we are like learning so much about the organism, we are creating a lot of patterns on how to engineer it. Why is it so hard to scale it?
Our ethos is quality. I'm really proud of that. I know it's something that you're proud of as well. I think most of us here are, all of us are. And at MycoWorks, we're just not interested in making materials that are just durable enough or just aesthetic enough to pass as leather in a photo or in some cheap consumer product. We make something special at MycoWorks. And we make an incredibly unique product. It's the only grown sheet of biomaterial. And so it's truly different. And even with our mass market partners, like the one we've already announced, General Motors, our contract, our partnership is about addressing the high-end opportunity within their product line, such as with their luxury electric vehicles. And, because what we're doing is special, it's also hard. And it wouldn't be special if it wasn't hard. And I'm also proud of the patience that we've had as a company in sticking to our guns and staying focused on quality and not taking these shortcuts, like just mixing our material with plastic or something like that. That would have been short-sighted. And so to talk about, the S word, scaling, and MycoWorks Fine Mycelium process, what's amazing about our process is that the reactor in which we grow our mycelium is a constant. And in simple terms, to make more fine mycelium, we stack more trays. It's an easier technical problem to solve than having to change the size of the reactor. And, the analogy there is it's easier to bake more cupcakes than it is to go from being an expert in baking a cupcake to then having to bake a cake that's 10 feet wide.
I still
right?
remember an analogy that you gave me with paellas.
There you go. Yeah.
Which is like,
one
it's one thing to
understand.
cook a paella for 4, and the other thing is cooking the paella for 12.
Yep.
There might be the same ingredients, but the cooking, the rice, it might be not 1-to-1. So
yeah, and there's lots of science behind that, but it's pretty simple. It's very akin to cooking. Similar scientific problems in both. And so the reality is that preserving quality while doing a lot of something, even if you're just baking lots of cupcakes, it's never easy to preserve that quality. Sure. And we have a platform at MycoWorks, our Fine Mycelium trays, that let us do that and tune what's happening in each tray, because the tray itself is the reactor. And designing a plant and an operation that can do that at scale, it was no easy feat, and it continues to be a huge problem to solve, and of course, a huge opportunity. And I think the reason why it's an opportunity is the most interesting thing to me. It's because when we nail this, when we have figured out how to industrialize this truly new process, one where a biological organism is grown to make a material, and a high quality material at that, rather than an ingredient or food or beverage. This then unlocks a fundamentally new system that humans have to make things. And coming back to this earlier point that once we can use a process such as our fine mycelium process to grow sheets in a way that tunes the material's cellular structure and composition at scale, then we are truly doing material science and have a true platform to make lots of different things and to be the next Dow Chemical or the next 3M. And leather is just the first step towards building the next great industry, and MycoWorks is the only one taking that approach. So, other biomaterials companies so far they've been trailblazers, and they have focused on gene editing, the biology part. But then unfortunately, by doing that first, they hit some roadblocks in then having to figure out what to do with those molecules. And so at MycoWorks, we're taking a different approach. We're coming at it from the other direction, which is to say that we're starting with an organism, mycelium, that already has structure and tunable structure. And then we're doing biology on that organism. So, the thing that clicked for me when I met this company was that mycelium is already a platform. It's this material that's already tunable. Phil showed that a long time ago. And because it's already tunable, these new biological tools are going to be able to impart things on mycelium in ways that they can't be imparted on other things. And, mycelium just is sort of a natural place to start with all that because it has this microstructure that, kind of looks like wet spaghetti under a microscope. And you can change the way that spaghetti intertwines and the space between it and then what it's made of. So many exciting things that we can do with it.
I love the idea or what you were saying about the patience that it takes. And I love it because in the culture that we live and the work that we had in the past, results are immediate. Like you do something, you get a result after. I don't know. I think it's educating folks in terms of don't have patience. It should be good enough or it should be okay. And I love what we're doing in terms of taking our time, learning and scaling the right way, even though sometimes it's it's a lot of nerves that it takes to do that. So I admire that and I love it. But the question is, where are we right now? At what stage are we in that process?
Well, we've grown over 30,000 trays now. Actually, I think we might be around 36,000 now, and all in the same 2-foot by 3-foot format. And through that, we've gotten a really detailed understanding of how to control our process. But, the amazing thing is that we have so much more to learn about this process as well. There are fundamentals we're still learning about. I mean, this is one study we did. Our R&D team did amazing work on mapping all the different constituents going into our substrate, which is the mycelium as food, and found ways to improve the product based on tuning the substrate, based on fine-tuning the ratio of lignin to cellulose in the wood and some other constituents that go into the mycelium's food, the substrate. And this is the really exciting stuff, that we're just on the ground floor of understanding how to tune this organism, mycelium, for use as a material rather than as a food. And so we're at a place where our leather product is clearly very scalable, and we're building this giant factory called Vidar in South Carolina to make more of it. And at the same time, we have all these other materials and even just these improvements to a leather-like material like our Reishi that we're chomping at the bit to explore via a bunch of projects that are still early, like gene editing. So again, it's a platform, and we're just beginning to tap into it.
Yeah, when you're saying 36,000, 30,000 trays, the ones that will be built in Vidar, the way when I talk to designers, I always say imagine that each tray is an ecosystem, that we have control over it. Imagine that each tray is a universe that we have control over. It's like a world. We're playing God almost with the organism, and we give him the food. And it's very, I don't know, it's a narrative that I always enjoy. And designers always get blown away when you tell the story like that. So I want to talk a little bit more about our product that designers are playing with, which is Reishi. Tell me a little bit more, why are we at the point that we can scale it? Why can we scale that product?
So, we're at a point where we need to scale it. And we need to scale it because the next evolution in our relationship with our customers, some of whom we've announced, many of whom we have not. And that's all exciting stuff that will
It's
come
fine.
in the future. We'll talk about it in
It's
future
hard to keep the
podcasts.
secret, though.
It is, but it's how the industry works, and it's cool. It's that way for a reason. And we need to scale because this is not something that this industry is just trying to experiment with. Obviously, there's a lot of experimentation going on, but it's all towards an end, which is heartening to see. It's very consistent across the whole industry that this industry is truly trying to change its supply chain. Because coming back to the first couple points I made, not only does the materials industry need to transform in the direction of sustainability, but we just need to find a way to make more materials. And this is just a demand problem coming from consumers around the world, but it's also a design problem. We need to be able to unlock new avenues for design, as we've talked about many times here at MycoWorks before. And I think that's what most of our collaborations are based on. But, we have to achieve scale because this is something that our customers and brands in general throughout the world want to adopt, they need to adopt. And we're at the precipice of that happening.
I mean, it sounds like a candy to me. And obviously the designers want new materials to play with because they probably found a block there. Like they want to be many things, but they don't find what they need. But that sounds hard. That sounds very, very hard. Mm-hmm. It's very just hard. Like, can you tell me what is like the problems that we're finding while we're doing this?
When I think about how hard it is to do this, there's of course all of the organizational, societal, all these difficulties around, how do you bring something new into the world? But stepping away from those things for a second, which I think are similar across different industries and different projects, we have a fundamentally hard problem because of the way the organism grows. So, this is something we spend a lot of time dealing with, let's say, a lot of time thinking about as well in terms of how to improve it. But we have a process whose growth time is measured in days. And this because biology takes time, right? And furthermore, along the way, over the course of those days, because it's a biological organism we're growing, it can differentiate. It can do different things. And we don't always want it to do those things. We've had to learn how to control them. And the question is, how do we do this when there exists zero standards around doing it, right? Like there are no testing protocols, there are no in-process measures that exist. There's nothing out there, again, coming back to, the text, we can't just open up a textbook and figure out how to grow mycelium. So these are all things that we've developed at our pilot plant here in Emeryville in California. And so as opposed to a process where the operation happens in seconds and you can just run a large number of experiments to iterate quickly, I think you and I have talked about watching like How It's Made on TV, or I love that show. And have you ever looked at a product like, I don't know, what's here on the table, like a pen or something, right? And wonder how they do that, right? How they perfect that so that they can make it over and over again. They did it by running tons of experiments quickly, and then they selected the parameters and the tool settings that worked. And if you wonder that about leather, well, that took literally generations because the cycle time is really, really long to have to grow a skin and then process those skins. So fundamentally, what's hard about what we're doing is that we need to make something high quality with biology, but we also need to do that quickly, relatively speaking. And therein lies the opportunity, right? Because when we've figured out how to do that, then that's the unlock, right? That's the cheat code on all this. And so the approach we've taken to do that, which I think is unique and actually quite revolutionary, is to apply scientific methods like good design of experiments, which is what you would expect, but also, and this is the subtler point, is to lean into the qualitative or the harder to measure, the harder to quantify aspects. And to put another way, if one were to state the problem as deliver mycelium that is exactly leather and survives, I'm just picking a couple random leather metrics here, that survives 10,000 abrasion cycles and 100,000 flex cycles, right? Your path of least resistance to doing that would be to coat the material in a ton of plastic or mix it with plastic or just turn your biomass into a new kind of plastic, as some folks are doing. But if your problem statement is make an amazing, emotional, but also performant material and one that can scale and be a platform for an entirely new industry, then you have to take a very different approach. And the path to get there has required incredible creativity in process engineering, not just science. For instance, we flip our mycelium trays during our process. It's super weird. There are no first principles in mycelium or fungal science that told us to do this, right? That part of the process is craft. And it came from a master. It came from Phil Ross perfecting his techniques. But now we can characterize the sheets that we're making and see how the biology changed through this operation and infer what mechanism we were activating when we flipped, these trays. And so it's like in cooking, you're in ancient Rome, coming back to analogy of where things are at now. And maybe you made an emulsion, you made a salad dressing, you mixed oil and water, right? And you got the oil to get suspended in the water. And maybe you did it by accident, and only thousands of years later did chemists come along and describe emulsion science and what exactly is going on. And again, that's another analogy for where we're at with mycelium at the moment. And we're doing that science and we're unlocking all this understanding. And so with biomaterials in general, it's just going to be such an exciting few decades, not only for this field, for designers, for the world, for all of us, because we're going to get a lot of cool new things made from biomaterials.
Wow, this is just the beginning. I'm overwhelmed. What can I say? When you have too many things in your head that it hurts a little bit, that's what's happening right now.
I'm glad I could give you that feeling.
There's many things that you were talking about that would trigger questions. And one of the most beautiful things at MycoWorks is that we're trying to find the science into a process that wasn't a science process. And I remember one of our first conversations where you were trying to convince me to join MycoWorks and the journey. You told me, Cheps, if I figure out the science behind this is going to be huge. I didn't fully grasp what you were talking about, but now I know. We were taking a lot of decisions that were based on aesthetics, based on feelings, based on touch. They weren't quantifiable. They were qualitative. The decision tree to those decisions are so complex that it's really hard to find the science behind. Mm-hmm. That doesn't happen that often, right?
I think it's a pretty unique position that we're in, and it's because our product is fundamentally an emotional product, right? Leather, and I've said this before, maybe even on the last podcast, but leather is this product that's a combination of performant, right? It's the original performance material. It's strong, it's durable, and it's also emotional. And it's emotional in that it's something we connect with because it's a skin and it feels familiar, and it has these biological properties that are not obvious until you kind of state what they are, right? But they absorb a little bit of the oils and the moisture in your fingers. They're breathable. They have this life to them, right? A lot of times people feel our material and they're like, oh, it feels alive. And leather experts, when they touch our material, they use words like, oh, it has bounce. It has life.
Life is the one that I get a lot.
Right. And it's, it's just a shortcoming of the words that we have to describe this kind of stuff. But the challenge that we've had, and a challenge that we will continue to have, and a big opportunity, is how do we translate these emotional properties of a material into something technical? And I think we've done a good job at that so far. And it's something that, we've built an organization that very actively tries to do that and is constantly contemplating quality and how we improve that.
Let me ask you something else. What is the role of Hermès, for example, in this process? Like, I know that quality, we talk about quality and the process is low. We do a lot of the science, but what's the role of a client like Hermès?
The North Star, right? Hermès is the partner that has helped us to understand what it means, what quality means, and what it means to build an organization that cares about quality. And they've done that through working with them. Patrick Thomas, who is on our board, who's the former CEO there, who we met independently of the commercial relationship there, but he's been a mentor to me, but also to the company in thinking about how to focus on quality. Also, a great podcast, by the way. And so we have this balance with our partners where we learn a lot about the industry and what materials need to be and where they need to go. But we also have to be responsible for not just getting pigeonholed as leather, as something that exists. And that's been the really interesting problem to solve in taking this to market, is that this is new. It's not leather. It does things that are like leather. It's the first thing that comes to mind when you look at it and feel it. And there's lots of reasons why you might want to use this instead of leather. But we've had to develop our own systems and our own vernacular around it. And we've had to do that in partnership, with our clients, with our partners, to develop this into something that's really amazing.
Yeah, because I totally see what you're saying, and I feel it on my own bones, because what we talk about is a new category of materials. It's really hard to communicate that. Like now when I was hearing, it does make sense when you explain it. But the truth is that we have to find a common ground. We have to find something that folks can see and visualize and understand. And of course, we look like leather. So right now, we are leather-like material. But when you explain the platform and when we talk about Vidar or the little that we know about biology, then is when at least I get really excited about it.
Yeah, it is more than leather, fundamentally. It's not, a replica. It's not a substitute. It is a different thing, and it can be used in a leather-like application, but it's something a lot more than that. It has things that can be done to it, like we were describing, with all the material science that can be done to it, and all this exciting biology that we're now applying to it. That's really going to make it, when I say more than leather, meaning it has features that leather doesn't have, from the way that it's used to the way that it performs to the way that it's made, I think, primarily. And then mycelium in general will just be so many other things as well beyond leather-like materials.
Yeah, and hopefully we are part of it as well.
I think we're leading the way.
That's cool. So last question that I have, it's more related to designers. And I agree with you, when we talk to the folks and we look like leather and all that stuff, that's the beginning. But it's really interesting to me, and I don't know if you share that when you talk more with in Paris, because you've been more in Paris. Normally when I talk to fashion designers, they resonate towards our brown natural material, which is the most different from leather. And it's very interesting because it feels like we had to do the stake in the ground with the black for folks to say oh, I get it. Mm-hmm. And now we are trying to bring the properties of the mycelia and showcase the beauty of this new material, which will take us to the new platform. And so my question will be, is that a common thread? Is all the designers feeling that way? They're more interested to the new type of textures and the new possibilities, or they go back and say black is cool, let me play safe?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I mean, this is such a great question, because it really gets to the core of, not only how we've begun to take this to the world, but also the versatility of the material. But I mean, you nailed it in describing that the challenge is this balance between being familiar enough, right, to get a foothold, versus being differentiated and being able to convey the differences and advantages that this material has over other materials that are already out there. And coming back to Hermès, they saw that uniqueness and went with an aesthetic that was very natural, like many designers, like you're saying, are interested in. And I think it's an incredibly beautiful material in its natural form, like many designers do. And this is something that we lean into as much as possible, because we love highlighting the result of this unique process. And every little feature on the mycelium tells a story of what happened during the growth. But at the same time, that's not an aesthetic. That's for everyone. And to build a business, we have to have that versatility where the material can become other things. It can be dyed, it can be embossed, it can be finished, it could have a bright finish or a matte finish or whatever. And again, this is where mycelium has such a unique role, because going beyond those surface level aesthetic things, into the analogy or the example that I gave before, where we've grown these thinner versions of the material that are like lambskin, and the thicker, denser versions that are like calf. I mean, that's an incredible versatility right there. That's a great example of this platform and how, and again, in familiar terms, we can draw comparisons to existing products that are on the market, like lamb versus calf, which are used for very different things, right? Leather jackets are typically made from lambskin, and a stiffer structured handbag might be made from calf. And these are things we can achieve with a single platform. It's just the starting point.
Wow. Well, then we'll say, we are 6 months ago until Vidar is open or fully operative. That will mean a lot of changes. Hopefully we talk before that. So put time in the agenda. But where are you going to be next? Like, where are you going?
I am going to Paris Thursday.
Here we go.
Yep. And then just will continue to bounce around between here and there and South Carolina.
Yeah.
And
what a trilogy. California, South Carolina, Paris.
It's a great combination.
It sounds good. Well, Matt, thank you so much for your time, as always. And hopefully we can connect soon and talk a little bit more. Since this is like a very open forum, I'll encourage folks that are listening to this to send your questions, because it feels like now we're opening like a talk to Matt type of talks on our podcast. So feel free to share your questions and we'll try to answer them. So thanks, Matt, again.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Cheers.
Appreciate it.
Ciao. Thanks, everyone, for listening to this episode. We hope you enjoyed it as much as I did hosting it. We are thrilled to have you with us in our journey. So if you want to learn more, please follow our Instagram page at MycoWorks for our latest news and more. This episode is being produced by Maddie Nathans, sound editing by Corny Vallardo, content editing by Chanda Aloto.